what and why of continuous discovery. I'm Teresa Torres. I work as a product discovery coach. I've coached teams around the world, and I teach them a structured and sustainable approach to continuous discovery. The practices I'm going to share today have been tested in a wide variety of industries across companies of all sizes. So I'm hoping each and every one of you can take something to apply to your own practice. Let's go ahead and get started. So I like to start at the very beginning. What do we mean by discovery? Discovery really captures the activities we do on a product as a product team to decide what to build. Whereas delivery is the activities we do as a product team to build and ship production quality software. Now this distinction is important because a lot of companies overemphasize delivery and underestimate discovery. Now, we're actually living in the heyday of discovery. Most product teams that I meet, you're doing some discovery activities. Maybe that means you're interviewing your customers, or you're usability testing your designs, you're running A/B tests, but most of us are still stuck in a project world. And what I mean by that is we kick off a new project, we do a bunch of discovery, we then build a bunch of stuff based on what we learned, and then we start over with the next project. What we're going to talk about today is a more continuous approach to discovery. Now, this is a really hard thing to distinguish between a project mindset and a continuous mindset. So I want to start with a definition. What do we mean by continuous discovery, and how does it look different from project-based discovery? So continuous discovery for me starts with, at a minimum, weekly touch points with customers by the team building the product, where that team is conducting small research activities week over week in pursuit of a desired product outcome. Now there's a lot in this definition, so we're going to go ahead and break it up and go through it line by line and get a sense for what does continuous discovery look like in practice, and how can we set a benchmark that your team can aspire to. So let's start with this first line, weekly touch points with customers. Why do we need to engage with our customers every week? So for most of us, we're making product decisions every day, right? Some of them are big strategic decisions, like what do we put on our roadmap, or what feature should we build? Others are smaller decisions, like what do we label this button, or where do we expose this feature in the interface? Here's the thing. Most of us know to do some discovery for those big strategic decisions, but we often skip over discovery for those daily tiny discovery questions. And here's what happens when we do that. If you pick up your phone and you scroll through pages and pages of apps, odds are you have dozens of apps that you downloaded at one point because you were excited about them. The company that built them and got the big idea right? They uncovered a customer problem, they got the big idea right. The app was compelling to you. However, when you started using it, it didn't quite work as you expected. It didn't really deliver on that big promise, which is why you don't use it anymore, right? So what's happening is that team likely did project discovery, right? They learned enough to know what type of product they should build, but they missed the mark on all the little tiny decisions that can make or break whether or not we actually use the product. And because we make these types of decisions every day, if we really want to be customer-centric in our discovery, we want to make sure that we infuse as many of those decisions with customer feedback as possible. And so as a result, I recommend that product teams engage with customers every week. Now, for those of you that rarely talk to customers, or you only talk to customers on a project basis, this might not sound very sustainable, but here's what I'm going to tell you. Just about every team that I have ever worked with, we have found a way for them to engage customers on a regular basis. Now, if you work with a really hard to reach audience, like high-powered CEOs, doctors, investors that are reluctant to share their strategies, you may not be able to get to weekly, but you can take a continuous improvement mindset to this type of work. If you're only interviewing customers quarterly, try to get to monthly. If you're doing it monthly, try to get to bi-weekly. If you're doing it bi-weekly, try to get to weekly. Many of the teams that I've worked with are actually engaging with their customers multiple times a week. Several of them, even in those instances where they're working with really hard to reach customers, are finding ways to connect with them on their terms in short bursts so they're able to keep continuous contact with their customers. Here's the reason why this is really valuable. When we start to engage with our customers every week, we actually have to shift the way that we work. So the way most teams tend to work in a project world is we do some research up front, right? We interview our customers to uncover their needs. We design solutions based on those needs. We do all the design work. We prototype it. We're about ready to build it. And in the last days or weeks before we start building, we put our prototypes in front of customers and we're asking them to validate, did we get it right? So that's sort of this validation mindset. We're asking our customers to check the box and say, yes, we got it right. The problem with the validation mindset is that we're getting feedback at the very end of the cycle. So if we learn that we missed the mark, we don't really have time to address the big problems. We only can make small cosmetic changes. When we engage with customers weekly, here's what happens. We don't always have a polished prototype to share. Sometimes we only have hand-drawn sketches. Other times we only have half-baked ideas. And when we engage with our customers every week, we stop validating and we start co-creating. And when we co-create with our customers, we get feedback throughout the entire journey. So when we have a half-baked idea, we can evolve the idea easily based on customer input. When we have hand-drawn sketches and not high-fidelity mock-ups, it's a lot easier to integrate our customers' feedback. So part of the benefit of this weekly cadence is that we're able to get feedback much earlier in the process. And the earlier in the process, the more likely we're going to make changes based on our customers' input, and we're actually going to end up co-creating with our customers rather than them just relying on them to validate our ideas. Okay, so let's go back to our definition. We've talked about weekly touch points with customers, trying to get to a co-creation mindset. So let's talk about by the team building the product. What do I mean by that? So the team starts with the product trio. This is the anchor of any product team. It's comprised of a product manager, a designer, and an engineer. Oftentimes the tech lead, oftentimes the design lead, but not always. Here's what we see in a product trio. We know that good digital products require all three of these mindsets. The product manager brings the business context and helps to make sure that our products are viable. The design lead or the designer brings the UX context and the voice of the customer and making sure that our designs are usable. The tech lead brings a deep knowledge of technology and makes sure that our solutions are feasible. We're going to see that these three roles working together are going to develop better solutions. So when we're talking about discovery research and discovery decisions, at a minimum, we want these three roles working together. Now, inevitably, people ask me, what about the other people on my team? So usually you have more than just 3 folks on your product team. You might have additional engineers. Depending on your DevOps strategy, you might have some QA folks. And most likely, you also have some business folks on your team. This could be product marketing folks. Maybe you have the luxury of having a user researcher embedded on your team. Maybe you have a customer success person on your team. Or maybe if you have a data-heavy product, you have a data analyst or a data scientist on your team. Here's what we're looking at when we're making discovery decisions. We want to make sure that we take a cross-functional perspective to the decisions that we're trying to make. So at a minimum, that's the product trio. However, for some decisions, you might bring in other folks. So for example, if you're trying to determine the right data model to support your customer needs, you might bring in a data analyst in that decision. If you're working on your go-to-market strategy and you're trying to figure out how to pull off a successful launch, you're probably going to bring in your product marketer in those decisions. But here's what I don't want you to do. I don't want you to include everybody in every discovery decision because you'll go way too slow. So when you're thinking about who needs to be involved in your discovery decisions, you're going to trade off inclusion with speed. So at a minimum, we want the trio. The trio working together can move quickly. There will be specific decisions where we want to bring in other folks, but we don't want to make the mistake of having 10 people in every decision because we'll just go too slow. Now, another question I get often is, What if I have a user research team that can do research for me? Or what if I have a business intelligence team or a market research team? Can't I just rely on their research? Here's the thing. Our centralized research teams work on a different cadence than the typical product team. They're doing longer horizon research. They're asking broader strategic questions. We can and should rely on that research, but not at the exclusion of doing our own research. What our product team research does is it helps us get fast answers to our daily questions, right? So we're trying to infuse as many of our daily product decisions with customer input, which is why we want the team that's building the product to do some of their own research. So if we go back to our continuous discovery definition, we've covered weekly touch points with customers by the team building the product. The idea here is we want that team getting fast answers to their own daily questions. So, okay, we now have a product trio. They're meeting with customers on a weekly basis. What are they doing in those meetings? Let's dive into this a little bit more. So we want our product trio to be engaging in research activities that will help them reach their desired outcome. Now there's a lot to unpack here. So let's first start with a visual that I like to use to help us externally visualize the discovery work that we're doing. So this is called an opportunity solution tree. It's a really simple diagram. It gets messy in practice, but that's okay. We're going to start at the top. We're going to start by defining a clear desired outcome for our discovery work. Now this is a unique thing. It's something that we're seeing the industry shift towards. Historically, we've had an output focus, right? Where we've filled a roadmap with features that we're going to build, and we measure our success based on did we deliver those features on time and under budget. An outcome focus actually shifts us more towards thinking about what's the impact of those outputs? Why are we building these features? What metric are we trying to drive? And oftentimes we want to start by thinking about what's the value that we need to drive for the business, and then thinking about what customer behavior would indicate that we're creating that value. So we're trying to balance the business needs with the customer needs. So our desired outcome typically represents something that will create value for the business. And it's a metric that the product team is focused on. What's nice about this is it sets the scope for discovery. So a product team is focused on how do we create value for the business in a way that creates value for customers, so that we're keeping those two things aligned. And it also gives the team latitude to explore. So as we learn what our customers need and as we experiment with how that impacts our business needs, we have a lot of freedom to figure out what to build. Next, once we have a clear outcome in place, we need to discover the opportunities that will drive that desired outcome. So what do I mean by opportunities? Opportunities represent customer needs, customer pain points, customer desires, that if we as a product trio were able to address them, we believe they would drive our desired outcome, right? So it's what are the problems, needs, pain points, desires that we as a team can address that if we did so would create value for the customer and value for the business. Both are equally important. Next, we need to discover the solutions that would actually deliver on those opportunities, right? And a lot of the ways that we do that is through prototyping and experimenting. We'll get back to that in a minute. So when we talk about our product trio engaging with customers on a weekly basis, we need to look at how can we drive this process of starting with an outcome, discovering opportunities, and then discovering solutions. So first, we need to negotiate what is our outcome. And this outcome really should be a two-way negotiation between your business leaders and your product trio. Your business leaders are going to bring across the business view of what does the business need now? What business value, what value can you create for your business? Whereas the product trio is going to bring the customer view of what value can we create for the customers. You're going to negotiate that outcome. That's going to set the scope for your discovery. We already know we want to be engaging with our customers every week. How are we going to do that? Well, we're going to interview them. So when we get our customers on the phone or in a room or over a Zoom call, we're going to learn about, our goal is to learn about their needs, their pain points, and their desires so we can start to map out the opportunity space. Once we've got a big picture view of the opportunity space, we're going to assess and prioritize, and we're going to choose one target opportunity to start with. Over time, we might address dozens of opportunities. But to create good products, we want to hyper-focus on one opportunity at a time to make sure that we're fully satisfying that need. Now, here's the problem. Most teams don't even do the work to map out the opportunity space. We're not talking to our customers often enough. And a lot of the reason for that is because it's hard to get our customers in the room, right? The biggest barrier to interviewing every week is it's just hard to recruit people to talk to. So what I'm going to recommend is that you automate your recruiting process. Here's the goal. I want you to wake up on Monday morning and have an interview on your calendar already without you having to do a single thing. This is a game changer. This is what makes interviewing on a weekly basis sustainable. There's a lot of ways to do this. You can recruit people as they visit your site, right? So as they visit your site, you pop up an ask, you offer a reward, they fill in a calendar event, it's on your calendar. You did nothing. You can also work with your customer-facing teams, your support team, your customer success team, your technical support team, your sales team, your account managers, and ask them to help book interviews for you. You can even define triggers and say, hey, if you talk to a customer that has experienced this problem, ask them to schedule an interview with us. For those of you that have really hard to reach audiences, remember like doctors and investors and high profile CEOs, one of the things that you can do is set up a customer advisory board. Now don't work with them like they're a focus group. Instead, ask specific customers to partner with you, to be kind of design partners as you develop your product, and ask them to individually book an interview with you every week or every month, probably every month. If you have enough people on your advisory board, you can then support weekly interviewing for your product teams. Now, once you've automated your recruiting process and you're conducting an interview every week, now you got to figure out, how do we ask the right questions? What should we be doing in an interview? Now, the biggest mistake I see teams make is they ask speculative questions. They ask people things like, what do you do in this situation? When do you do it? How often do you do it? Why do you do it? The problem with this is that humans generally are terrible at understanding our own behavior. We're not very good at summarizing what we do. We don't always know what we do or why we do it. And that's simply because we don't often reflect on our own behavior. So instead of asking these who, what, why, how questions, I want you to avoid speculative questions. And instead in your interviews, collect stories. Collect specific stories about what your customers have actually done in the past. And this will dramatically increase the reliability of what you're hearing in your interviews. Stories are also a great way to hear customer needs, customer pain points, and customer desires. So we talked about when mapping out the opportunity space, we really want to make sure that we're uncovering customer needs, customer pain points, customer desires. This is not as easy as it sounds. We can ask people, what do you need? But oftentimes we're not even aware of our own needs. We become so accustomed to how the world works that we just gloss over the pain points. However, when you collect specific stories, those needs and pain points start to emerge, right? We can see in the story context where they're running into challenges. So stories are a great way to surface those opportunities. And then you can use the opportunity solution tree to help you structure them. That structure is going to make it easy for you to assess and prioritize. And like I said earlier, your goal with assessing and prioritizing is that we want to focus on one target opportunity at a time. We might, over time, address many opportunities. In fact, most outcomes require addressing many opportunities. But by focusing on one at a time, it's really going to help us ensure that we're fully solving that need. This has a big impact on quality. So a lot of products partially solve a lot of opportunities, but they don't fully solve any of them. In fact, if we go back to that mobile app example, if you open up mobile apps that you haven't used in a while, odds are they kind of solved your needs, but not fully. And so we're not satisfied as customers, we stop using the apps. So working on one opportunity at a time is a great way to increase the quality of your product if you make sure that you're testing that you actually did address that opportunity. One of the best ways to make sure you're fully addressing an opportunity is to work with sets of solutions. So you can see in the visual here, we are brainstorming. We're actually going to brainstorm way more than 3 ideas. We're going to brainstorm lots of ways to address our target opportunity. And then we're going to choose a set to work with. So a set could be our 3 best ideas. Remember, they're all solving the same target opportunity. And our goal is to make sure that we're comparing and contrasting them against each other. So let's talk about why. Most product teams work with 1 idea at a time. Now, don't get me wrong. I know you have a backlog full of 1 million ideas. But when you're designing an idea, when you're trying to solve a problem, odds are you gravitate to your first idea and you start working on it. You start designing it. You start testing it. You get prototype feedback. The challenge is when we work with 1 idea at a time, the question we're asking is this idea good or not? The problem with this question is it's a whether or not question. We're setting up a whether or not decision. So a whether or not decision is, should we do this or not? Right? Should we build this idea or not? We know from decision-making research that whether or not decisions lead to poor decisions. They set us up to fall prey to confirmation bias, where we only see the evidence that supports our idea and we miss all the evidence that refutes our idea. And because we're not considering other options, we just don't really truly evaluate the idea. To avoid this, we want to set up a compare and contrast decision. Now, a compare and contrast decision, we're saying which of these ideas look best, right? So we're working with a set of solutions that solves the same target opportunity, and we're saying which of these ideas look best. Now, the visual I want you to keep in mind as you compare and contrast your solutions against each other is I want you to imagine that you're sitting in a stadium full of people back in the days when that was possible, and you're watching Usain Bolt run around a track. Now, if Usain Bolt was running around a track by himself, and I asked you if he was fast, this is kind of a hard question to answer. If you don't know who Usain Bolt was, he was at one point the fastest 100-meter runner in the world. So if you're watching a fast runner running around a track by himself, you don't have anything to compare him to. So is Usain fast compared to a cheetah? Probably not. Is he fast compared to a Tesla? Actually, in the first 100 meters, I'm not really sure. But if I ask you, is he fast relative to other people? Absolutely. This is an easy question to answer. So when you're experimenting and you're comparing and contrasting your solutions against each other, I really want you to ask easy questions. Which of these solutions looks best? And then I want you looking for a clear front runner. That's how you're going to identify those really good ideas. Now, part of that requires that we prototype and that we experiment to evaluate those ideas. And most ideas are not good in the beginning, right? As we experiment and prototype, we're going to learn more about what makes an idea not work, what makes an idea work, and we're going to have to evolve our ideas to make them better, right? So it's this evolution of our ideas from kind of mediocre ideas through prototyping and experimenting, they're going to become better, and that's how we find successful products. So there's sort of this myth of like we generated this great idea. Usually we brainstorm and we get a lot of mediocre ideas, and then we got to evaluate and test and prototype to figure out how do we turn one or two of these ideas into better ideas, into good ideas. So how do we do that? A lot of teams like to just build the ideas and A/B test them. Here's the challenge with that. We just did a lot of work before we figured out what will actually have an impact, right? We had to build everything to A/B test it. Most of us don't have enough traffic to A/B test quickly. We have to wait days or weeks to have enough traffic to really evaluate which feature worked best. So I want to introduce an idea that's going to help you rapidly test your ideas and really speed up your evaluation process. So the first thing we want to do is, instead of testing the whole idea, so we're not going to build the whole thing and A/B test it, we're not going to prototype the whole thing and go get qualitative feedback. What we're going to do is we're going to take our idea and we're going to break it down into its underlying assumptions, and we're going to test those assumptions. It's going to allow us to move really quickly and to be able to get good compare and contrast feedback. So what do I mean by assumptions? So When we generate solution ideas, they're actually built on a foundation of a lot of assumptions. Some of them are desirability assumptions. Assumptions around, does anybody want this? And why would they want it? Some of them are viability assumptions. Viability is really about, should our business build this? Is it worth it to our business? Is the reward worth the effort? Some of those assumptions are feasibility assumptions. Can we build it? Is it possible? I want to introduce two other categories that are less common. Actually, one of them is very common, which is usability assumptions. So can anyone use it? The other is ethical assumptions. So is there any potential harm in building this? So a good product team is taking their solution ideas, they're breaking it down into a set of assumptions that fall into these 5 categories, and then they're using their prototyping and their experimenting to rapidly test these assumptions. There's a huge benefit to working this way. Many of your ideas are going to share the same assumptions. So think about assumptions as building blocks, right? So as we experiment and as we test assumptions, we start to collect building blocks. Some building blocks will work to make great products. Some building blocks are going to create a faulty foundation and cause a solution to fail. The more assumption tests you run, the more you can develop these 2 piles, assumptions that are good, that support good ideas, and assumptions that are faulty, that will cause an idea to fall apart. And so every round of assumption testing actually puts you in a better position to evolve, to either generate new ideas or to evolve your kind of mediocre ideas into better ideas. So instead of just throwing spaghetti at the wall, A/B testing feature after feature, every assumption test is actually helping you generate even better ideas and to make your mediocre ideas stronger and stronger. Okay, so we just covered a lot of ground. So let's go back to our definition for a minute. You're engaging with customers on a weekly basis. You're the team that's building the product, that product trio. In those weekly engagements, you're interviewing to collect stories so you can map out the opportunity space.
Hey guys, you heard Teresa, right? I would definitely suggest you all to go to producttalk.org. Look at that. I think she's amazing, teacher of continuous discovery. I personally used it in the last 2 to 3 years, and some of the very good concepts, which I would say, some of the habits which we have tried to build in product management is to actually visit customer every week. Every week means every week. So I think my ex-team, we had visited around 2,000 odd customers. It is a bunch of 50 odd product managers. So we had to, like, each of them now visit to a customer every week. And sometimes there is a very clear purpose to just, to know whether this will work. And sometimes there are very open-ended conversation to understand the need. And discovery is something which I have found very, very useful, a very useful technique to kind of decide what to build and why to build. And sometimes it's not at a very, very high level. It is at a very detailed level when you are looking at a feature. What can be a wow part, right? You can build some proto, but you did not have a full-fledged production code ready, design ready stuff. So if you do continuous discovery, what you create is a great funnel, a funnel where you are building a right product. You iterate very fast. You can actually do product development at a high speed. I think the amount of change we are seeing in this world right now, if you have to keep pace with it, you want product managers to be empowered to own the subject. I think continuous discovery is a great way to enable them. Yeah. So I think that's it. And I think there are a lot of trainers, and Teresa seems to be, to me, was a very awesome individual here. So thank you, Teresa. Next, we would like to hear from Costa what the next session is up to.